when you walk around the streets, you see like animals on the street, and you look at them and you go, I wonder what happens to them. Where do they go? Well, they all go to the animal shelter, and when they go to the animal shelter, they need food and shelter, and they need a place to stay. But animal shelters can only like have animals there for a certain amount of time. What happens to these animals is the dog catchers will end up getting them, and they'll take them to the animal shelter. But, you know, like I said, animal shelters can only hold on to animals for so long. According to the Santa Barbara County Animal Evaluation, 56% of dogs and 71% of cats that enter the shelter gets euthanized. That euthanized is another word for putting a living animal to death humanely meaning in a nice manner. So it's not like they're putting them to death in a painful way. It isn't very painful. But these animals, it's not their fault they're getting euthanized. It's not their fault that they're in the animal shelters. It's the people's fault. It's the people's fault for breeding them. It's the people's fault for not wanting these animals at the animal shelter. But there's nothing wrong with them. It's just people let them go. People don't care that they have them licensed. People don't care that they're tagged. They just let them go. Like, for example, my uncle, he said supposedly the dogs got out, but we all know he let them out and let them go. What happens to the animals? They'll usually get put down if someone doesn't adopt them, or they'll end up getting killed on the street. People need to be more considerate of animals. But like I said, let's go back to the animal shelter. They made this law called Responsible Pet Owner Ordinance. It's a law that they made to reduce euthanizing animals. And it's a law saying you have to license your animal. If you get an animal, you have to license them. They don't have to be fixed, and you don't have to anything like that, but they have to be licensed. They have to be able to know who the owner is when they get them into the animal shelter. Because, you know, when they go to the animal shelter, they need to be able to try to find who the person who owns the animal, and if they can't, then they will stay there for a certain amount of times. According to the ASAP, which is one of, I don't know exactly what it stands for, but it is one of the animal places that actually will pay for animal cops to go around, and they go around and take care of animals. So when someone calls and says there's an animal like starving or something, they go check it out. They estimated that if an animal does not get picked up in about 5 days, and there's like it has some sort of a medical problem or anything like that, and they can't afford it, or there's not enough room in their shelter, they get euthanized. And that's 4 days. 4 days they get euthanized because somebody didn't get them licensed, because someone let them out in the streets. I think this is a very important thing. Like, why are these animals getting euthanized because of what people do? How is it their fault that they have to be put down and die? Animals have the right to live just as humans have the right to live. Now that you kind of are aware what happens to animals when they're in the shelter, I'm going to tell you like the most effective way to fix it. And the most effective way is to stop breeding. Stop breeding animals all the time. I understand everybody wants a purebred. Well, if you keep purebreding dogs, they're going to come like Dalmatians, and they're going to become retarded, and they're going to be evil, because that's what usually happens. They get inbred, and when something gets inbred, their genetics just don't work out. But animals at the animal shelters sometimes are purebred. Sometimes they are puppies. Like, personally, I've adopted 2 animals from my 2 dogs from the pound, and both of them I love to death. One's full-blown corgi, and the other one I have no idea what she is. But I love them to death, and I would not trade them in for the world to get a purebred dog just because it's purebred and just because it has the name of being a purebred. It's like us. None of us are purebred. Why do we have to be purebred? It's like a dog. It's like a child. You know, when you meet somebody and they're Asian and you're Caucasian, it's the same kind of thing. But personally, I think people should adopt animals more, and people just don't know what happens to animals when they go to the shelter. And I think this is a problem because people don't understand. When you overbreed animals, they can't just be on this earth happy. They can't just be out roaming around like we can. It doesn't work like that. They get euthanized. This is one of the fires that the
Santa Barbara County published, and it was for Cinco de Mayo, trying to get people to adopt Chihuahuas because there's a lot of Chihuahuas around this neighborhood, you guys would know. And it's just saying, like, it's just trying to get people to spay, neuter their animals, and to adopt animals and stuff, and that sort of aspect. And it has numbers that you can go to. And there's not just the animal shelter, there's also the Humane Society. That's 2 just in our one town. Like, there's so many animals you can choose from. But the problem is they just don't have enough money. So now that you are aware of what happens to animals and you kind of know, like, what I'm saying, what you should do, is there any questions that anybody has for me?
Do you love your corgi?
I love my dogs to death. My dog Bacardi, she's my baby. She's like my little princess.